Awareness is freedom, and a lack of awareness or ignorance is suffering. Let me explain how. So, in most Eastern philosophical traditions, and I think one could argue at the essence of all religion and spirituality in general, but particularly in Buddhism, Hinduism, and the Vedic traditions, the yoga traditions, there is this understanding that is universally outlined, and at the real essence of it, it is that there are two real ways of being. There's a way of being mindful and aware, and there's a way of being ignorant and unaware or asleep. And these traditions are the ones that are most commonly associated with awakening, with spiritual awakening, and seeing spirituality as an awakening process. Now, what is it that we're waking up from? Well, in these traditions, they say it is avidya. Avidya, and why I put the emphasis on the is because the word vidya in Sanskrit means knowledge, and avidya means a lack of knowledge, which is also translated as ignorance. And this is seen as the root cause of suffering. Because we don't know any better, because we don't understand what the truth is, because we believe things to be true that are not true, we suffer. We identify with things that are not who we are at our essence. We see the world through a distorted lens of ignorance, and this causes us to filter all of our experiences in a way that distorts them to be perceived as negative, to be perceived as harmful, as something inducing of fear, of stress, of anxiety, of greed, of anger, confusion, and all of these inner mental states that cause us suffering. And the reason that we suffer from these mental states is because we are identified with our mind. And out of a lack of understanding, because of ignorance, we don't realize that there is a deeper aspect to our being that is beyond the mind, that transcends the mind and precedes the mind. That so many of us, our attention is really immersed in our minds. We identify with the thinker, we identify with the one inside of us that is thinking of reality and ourselves in a particular way. We have many different concepts about reality and about ourselves, most of which we have inherited from our culture. We have been conditioned to believe ourselves to be a certain somebody with a certain family background, a certain culture that we live in, a certain nationality, certain political and religious beliefs, certain roles in life that we play, and all of these, with many other things, can form an image of self, an image of me, of who I think that I am, and we go on trying to improve this image, trying to validate this image, and ultimately trying to prove to the world that this image, and to ourselves, that this image does in fact exist, when it's entirely based on thought. It may be thoughts that are, based on some relative truths about ourselves, but in the deepest essence of who we are, we're not an idea. We're not a story about ourselves. We're not a belief about ourselves. And on such a deep subconscious level, we have many different beliefs about us that we identify with, and this causes us to not perceive things as they really are. So we are not awake to reality as it actually is, but we are asleep in a sense, living in the dream of our mind. We are completely immersed in this mental reality that is looking out at the world, judging, analyzing, interpreting, comparing, forming opinions, and filtering all of that through our past knowledge, our memory, our past experiences, and all of these cultural concepts and language that we have learned and inherited that creates a very distorted perception of the world. And yet, all it takes is a moment of awareness for us to, snap out of this hypnotization of our culture and our mind to have a actual experience of reality in the way that it is. So instead of looking out at a tree, for example, and just seeing it as this word, an idea, tree, whatever that actually means, it's just a sound, a vibration with some meaning associated with it. But if we actually stand before this thing that we call tree and allow ourselves to experience it with full awareness, allow ourselves to see all of the colors, all of the different shapes and textures, to feel the different textures, to feel the smoothness of the leaves, the roughness of the bark, to smell the aroma of the different parts of this tree, to hear the wind going through the branches, or to hear the way it sounds when our fingers rub against the bark. If we immerse our senses completely in this experience of the tree, then we start to realize that this being that we call tree is something that is completely beyond our ability to describe with words. It is so far removed from the ideas that we have about it, and yet most of us, when we look out at the world, we're experiencing it through these ideas that we have. Ideas about a tree, ideas about the person that we love, ideas about our family, about our friends, about society, about politics, about culture, about movies, about ourselves. So many different ideas that we have about things that prevent us from having this experience of things as they actually are. And when we just take that moment to have an experience of something as it actually is, it wakes us up from this world of ideas and concepts, and it helps us to see that it is just an idea, a world of ideas and concepts. Our thoughts about reality, however tightly we hold on to them, however much we think that they're true, they're just thoughts. And most people live their entire lives based on this reality of thoughts. They are caught in their thoughts, caught in their thinking, they're projecting their thoughts out onto everything, and rather than seeing the world as it is, they see the world as they think that it is. So, when we are aware, when we bring our awareness back to the present moment, when we take it out of this constant thinking and projecting our thoughts and creating stories and narratives about our experience, when we remove our attention and our awareness from this and bring it back to ourselves, and bring it back to our bodies, and back to our immediate sensory experience of life, we realize something very unique about life, that it is alive, that things are alive, things are happening in the present moment. Life is ever changing, unfolding, interconnected, and mysterious. It fills us with a sense of awe when we truly experience things as they are in this way. And the more that we do this, the more present and aware that we are, the more it frees us from our misconceptions and our ideas about how we think things are. And this is one of the key ways that awareness is freedom and the source of freedom. It's because we may be suffering from these mental states that we experience. We may be suffering from our fear, from our anxiety, from our anger, from our craving, our desire, our lust, our greed, our attachments, all of these mental processes. But as soon as we pay attention to them, as soon as we start to see with awareness, as soon as we recognize our anxiety, our fear, our greed, our desire, our lust, our craving, and all of these emotional states that trouble us, once we witness them, we are no longer so immersed in them. They're not coloring our entire experience, but we kind of take a step back and can at least see, I am experiencing anxiety, I'm experiencing fear, I'm experiencing greed or craving. And that space, that spaciousness, creates enough of a gap for us to choose, for one, whether we want to agree with these states of mind, these thoughts and beliefs and ideas, and also we get to choose what we want to do with this awareness, how we want to respond to these emotions. Rather than just being pushed and pulled and at the mercy of them, we have the freedom to decide how to respond to our experience. And that freedom is incredibly underrated and undervalued, and something that many people don't actually have. Many people are just victims of their minds and their ways of thinking and the circumstances that they find themselves in, and don't take that time to just recognize the power of choice that they have to choose how they want to act in any given moment, how they want to think about a moment, how they want to relate to it, what kind of attitude they want to have. And we have that power to decide only when we have awareness. Because if we're not aware, if we are distracted, if we are caught in our thinking, we don't have that spaciousness and that awareness to recognize our power to choose. There's a really brilliant author who was a Holocaust survivor and someone that experienced a lot of hardship in their life and went on to become a psychologist. And something that this author, his name is Viktor Frankl, one of his most famous quotes is that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose. And in that power to choose lies our freedom. So that was one of the things that he realized through his hardships and his experiences, is that even though his circumstances were incredibly difficult and challenging and painful, that he still had this freedom within himself to choose how he wanted to respond to his experience. And he considered that to be the last of our freedoms, the greatest freedom that cannot be taken away from us, is that within ourselves we have this power to recognize the space between stimulus and response, and then therefore choose how we want to respond to the stimulus in our lives. And so really the difference in whether we experience life with suffering, with unhappiness, with misery and negativity is whether we are at the mercy of our mind or not. When we are at the mercy of our thoughts and our judgments and our beliefs and our moods and emotions, we get caught in them and they start to just push us and pull us in all of these directions. But we can experience a life of freedom, of happiness, of joy, of peace, of beauty, of awe, when we wake up out of the mind and wake up to a more clear perception of reality and a more clear perception of ourselves and who we fundamentally are. Because when we have that awareness, we have total freedom to choose. How do I want to live? How do I want to act? How do I want to think? What do I want to invest my energy, my attention, and my time in? But if you don't have that awareness, then you're just at the mercy of your thinking. And many of our thoughts tend to be negative, and even if they're not, they're still just thoughts. So if we're mistaking them for being reality, then we get sort of hypnotized by the mind and dragged into its perception of reality, which is always distorted, which is always less than the reality of how things actually are. Like in that example of the tree, I may know intellectually all of these things about a tree, like the botany of its branches and its leaf structures and leaf patterns and its root structures and the type of soil it likes, and I can know all of these facts and information about the tree, which can be useful, which has its place. But as long as I'm looking at a tree through that lens, I'm not experiencing the living reality of the tree. And when we are fully present and fully awake to reality, we can start to sense that living presence in everything, in ourselves, in every living being, in our friends, our family, deeper than the mind personality sort of matrix. Deeper than that, there is a living presence. There is the energy of life that's animating all of us. And when we are awake to life in the present moment, we can start to perceive that, to sense that, experience that, and in that, feel our aliveness, feel the mystery of life. Like, what is this that's happening? What is this experience that we're all having? The fact that the sun rises, that the stars shine, that plants grow, that our body is perfectly designed to experience life, to extract nutrition from our environment, to extract air and oxygen that allows us to breathe and to function. All of this is miraculous. And we do not feel this sense of awe at the miracle of life because we are so caught in our culturally conditioned way of perceiving. So I could go on and on about this, and I know I've already gone on quite a bit about it, but I'm really passionate about this subject because it's really the difference between whether we experience life with happiness or suffering, whether we feel trapped and miserable or free and joyful. It comes down to our mind and our awareness, and whether we are aware or unaware, whether we are knowledgeable about life or ignorant about life. And one of the fundamental practices that helps us cultivate this awareness is the practice of mindfulness. And mindfulness has become somewhat of a buzzword today because it's grown in popularity, thankfully. But with that, some people tend not to really understand it or value it for what it is. And as simple as mindfulness is, ultimately what it is a practice of experiencing reality as it is in the present moment without judgment. So, in this sense, it is both a state of being, a way of being, a way of experiencing the world, and it's also a practice, a way to practice having that relationship with the world. But the more that we are mindful, the more that we are free from forgetfulness. So, forgetfulness is kind of like the antithesis or the opposite of mindfulness. And we can really only be in one mode of being at a time. When we are mindful of reality, there's an absence of forgetfulness. When we are forgetful about reality, there's an absence of mindfulness. And just knowing this, just understanding this already can be inspiring for us to start to practice mindfulness more, to recognize when we fall into forgetfulness, and to see, even though there's a slight, seems like a subtle difference between these two things, it has a dramatic effect on our lives. If I fall into forgetfulness and ignorance and I get caught in my thinking and my mental and emotional patterns, I start acting according to those patterns in ways that often lead towards my own unhappiness and suffering. But if I am aware and conscious, and I use my conscious awareness to choose to do things that are positive, that are nourishing, that are taking care of myself and are uplifting, inspiring, and positive, I start to experience life in a completely different way. So really, I wanted to create this video mostly as just a reminder for you to pay attention, to be aware of your mind, and notice where you will allow the mind to take you. What is the consequence of being forgetful, of allowing the mind to govern your experience? And also to remind you that at any single point, you can stop, take a breath, let go, relax, and come back to the moment. Free yourself from that preoccupation with your thinking and come back to a clear awareness of the present moment, and deepen your breath, deepen your awareness, pay more attention to your actual sensory experience, and therefore start to have a more connected experience to the present moment and start to experience more freedom and joy as a result, and not be so much at the mercy of your negative thinking. So if you'd like to learn more about this, I've created a bunch of different videos on this subject over time, but I created a course called the Awakening with Mindfulness course, and it's a 14-day mindfulness training in which day by day we go deeper into what mindfulness is and how to use mindfulness and this teaching known as the 4 foundations of mindfulness, how to use this to wake up, how to not fall into forgetfulness, but how to live a life that is more awake, that is more mindful, that is more conscious, and therefore more free. So if you'd like to learn more about that course, you can visit the link in the description of this video. And I also created a free community called the Conscious Collective Community, where you can get access to different resources, like meditation courses, guided meditations, free books, different things that can help you in this journey of being more awake and aware. So I'll also leave a link to that in the description below this video so that you have some resources that you can expand on this understanding in this journey if you feel inspired to do so. So thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that it was a reminder for you to be more mindful, to be more present and aware, and to be free of your mind, to know that if you are caught in your mind and your anxieties and your fears and these mental states, that there is a way to freedom, and that the way is awareness. Start to pay more attention to your experience and start to let go of this reality of thought. use thoughts when they're necessary, but know that they're just thoughts. So if you find yourself caught in this realm of thinking, come back to your body, come back to your breath, come back to the present moment to free yourself from that preoccupation with the mind and to come back to the reality of now where life, real life, is happening. So hopefully that was translated and communicated through this video. Thanks again for watching. Have a peaceful and mindful day.